Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we continue our ongoing coverage of the Russian-Ukrainian war. And today, we're going to start off with the aid that is being sent to Ukraine. Specifically, we know there are Ukrainian troops in the United Kingdom that are currently training on the Challenger 2 main battle tank. It is anticipated in the not-too-distant future that the United Kingdom will deliver 14, or a company-sized element, of those Challenger 2 main battle tank to the Ukrainian military. Now, we believe that the Ukrainians will create, or are creating, some sort of a composite battalion tactical group that is comprised mostly of British equipment. So you'll have 14 British Challenger 2 main battle tanks, a number of British armored personnel carriers, and then also a number of British artillery pieces as well. So first, how is this battalion grouping of specifically British Western equipment going to fare in Ukraine? Well, it has to be a little bit unnerving for those forces, as I would imagine that that unit would make it to the top of the Russian hit list to target. The Russians undoubtedly have the objective to target that battalion group and get video footage of Challenger 2 main battle tanks being destroyed. So from that aspect, it again has to be unnerving for those Ukrainian troops that will be forward deployed in those Challenger 2s and those British armored personnel carriers. Now, how effective are 14 Challenger 2 main battle tanks going to be? Well, I mean, absolutely, without a doubt. If I was deployed in Ukraine, I would much rather be in a Challenger 2 main battle tank. And I think if the Ukrainians had hundreds of these systems at the start of the war, then they would have helped. It would have definitely caused an increased level of casualties for the Russians. But 14 of these vehicles being deployed now. Again, we hear about the Challenger 2 and we think about, okay, there's going to be these tank-to-tank duels of Challenger 2 versus T-90 tanks or T-72 Bravo 3s or T-80s. And it's very possible that these Challenger 2 systems never engage a single Russian tank. And I know you're probably saying, what? How could that be possible? That's not possible. Well, it is. It's very much so. So, again, it's a very small unit, a company-sized element of just 14 tanks. This unit, in all probability, could at some point, once Russian intel is able to fix their position and understand where this battalion grouping of British tanks is operating in. Again, it is going to be target number one. You will have drones attempting to verify, but more importantly, quite possibly get video footage of these vehicles, followed by what undoubtedly will be a long-range, multiple-launch rocket attack against these vehicles. And we know that through the course of this war, the number one killer of main battle tanks outside of anti-tank guided weapon systems has been artillery. You know, in previous wars, going back to World War II, when we had massed artillery fire, the level of accuracy of artillery was not like what we're seeing now. So you have these drones transmitting real-time intelligence data to these artillery batteries, be it a multiple launch rocket system like a Russian Smerch, or even 152 millimeter artillery pieces. So it would not surprise me that this unit of Challenger 2 main battle tanks could be observed by Russian drones many miles from the actual line of contact, and then at some point get engaged by long-range precision-guided systems, and then destroyed. Now, will the Russians have video footage of this? Possibly. We'll see what happens. I would say that also the Russians may want these Challenger 2 main battle tanks to get closer to the line of contact where they can physically try and capture one or more of these Challenger 2 main battle tanks. Obviously, that would be a hoot for Russian forces to capture and state that they have destroyed this British-equipped battalion group that has been deployed against them. So, again, a bit unnerving for those Ukrainian troops. Yes, it is a better piece of equipment, vastly better than the T-64 tanks that the Ukrainians have been using, even the upgraded T-64s. I've had the opportunity to enter a variety of Soviet/Russian main battle tanks, and I get the philosophy of use and the doctrine, but as a tanker or a former tanker, I probably would not be a tanker if I had to be in a T-72. And again, probably will get some pushback by the Russian side of things, but again, it's just a different tank. I mean, having been in a 72 versus an Abrams or a Challenger or a Leopard, just a much higher quality piece of equipment in terms of comfort and ease of use, I would say. But I don't want to get too much into that. But again, we'll see what happens to these tanks once they're deployed, as are other pieces of equipment in terms of main battle tanks going to be deployed to Ukraine, such as the Leopard 2s. It sounds like the Leopard 2 is going to be the tank of choice at some point if they eventually get over there. But we'll see what happens. Now, within the battle space, I wanted to talk about one other issue, a very concerning issue, is that there has been a increased level of chatter, an increased possible state of alert regarding nuclear forces of both the Russian Federation and the United States. Now, obviously, the Kremlin has negated certain treaties, and essentially, to my knowledge right now, there are no nuclear treaties now that are being honored by either the United States or the Russian Federation. I think the biggest treaty that was eventually null and voided was the ground-launched cruise missiles. So I believe they had a range limited to a couple of 100 miles. Now it appears that's off the table, and you can fire these nuclear-tipped cruise missiles in excess of 1,000 miles, or whatever your technology has the ability to field now. But at one point, that was the treaty that appears to be gone now, and it looks like in terms of nuclear posture, nuclear forces, we're right back to the 1950s, 1960s. Anything goes. And as I've talked about before, we are in the most dangerous time, probably for the possible risk of some sort of conflict between Russia, the United States, and the possible deployment of nuclear weapons. Now, are the Russians going to use nuclear weapons? Probably not. The only way that I foresee that the Russians would use nuclear weapons, and in all probability, they would be tactical nuclear weapons or battlefield nuclear weapons, ranging from 0.5 kilotons up to a kiloton or two. And that would be if the Ukrainians are successfully able to cross the Dnieper River or launch an offensive south of Zaporizhia, cutting off the land corridor to Crimea, and more specifically, a direct threat to Crimea. I believe that if it comes to that, if the Russians are facing a conventional defeat, that they would use tactical nuclear weapons to defend Crimea. And I don't believe at any point Ukraine is going to get the Crimean Peninsula back. And I believe at this point, for the benefit of humanity, the Ukrainians need to come to terms with that. And I know that's hard to hear, and I know that the dumbed down, low information person in the United States, when they hear that, is going to immediately define me as a Russian supporter, and they probably believe adamantly, as some Ukrainians do, that eventually they may get the Crimean Peninsula back. Again, not going to happen. And yeah, anyone out there who wants to put some money on that, be more than happy to take your money. But I don't see that happening. And if it became a threat, if it became real for the Russians, again, they're going to use tactical nuclear weapons. They're not going to lose the Crimean Peninsula again. It's not going to happen. So that is kind of what we're seeing right now in terms of this increase in possible nuclear alert positions taking place. Obviously, the United States is communicating with its attack boomer fleet. It's nuclear subs, and obviously the Russians with its both its submarine fleet that has the capability of launching nuclear weapons, its missile silos, its road mobile long range intercontinental ballistic missiles. That's a system that the Russians have, those road mobile systems that the United States doesn't. The United States uses for the most part its nuclear triad. Obviously, is its submarine fleet launching ballistic missiles, its stealth bomber fleet, B-2 stealth bombers, and then silo-based systems. But the U.S. doesn't have those road mobile systems, the like of which the Russians do. But as we look at the actual battlefield, we're going to zoom in here, and we're going to look at Bakhmut, and we're going to do a little bit of kind of what the battlescape looked like. And we're going to go back to about a week. And you can kind of see the way the battlescape has unfolded, a little more than a week, obviously. So here was Bakhmut. And we're going to fast forward to kind of see what's happening on the line of contact. You can see as I start to push forward that the Russians are steadily pushing forward. And we're continuing to see these brutal battles taking place, these pitched infantry engagements. We're also seeing, obviously, tank engagements. But by and large, it is a infantry war, especially closer to the inner city of Bakhmut. So here we go forward and just kind of see what has happened over the course of the last few days. And you can clearly see the Russians pushing forward. And they're going to continue to do so. And they're going to continue this pressure campaign. And eventually we could see a broader offensive operation, probably maneuver warfare, take place. Again, I believe we're going to see this occur in late summer. I've talked about this often. In the meantime, we're going to kind of see the status quo pressure campaign by Russian forces, the continued use of the Russian Air Force, continued use of its heavy artillery divisions, which have now been formed by the Russians. The Russians are going back to old school doctrine, right? Old school Soviet massed artillery is being used by them right now. They're going away from the battalion tactical group, especially in terms of the deployment of their artillery. They're massing artillery, massing fires of artillery. They're creating artillery divisions and brigades of nothing but artillery. And they're using that to pummel Ukrainian forces until what they hope, the Russians hope, is the general collapse of the front line for Ukrainian forces. And Russians have plenty of artillery. They have massive factories, large factories in Russia that produce large amounts of artillery. And at the same time, the Russians have the ability to target Ukrainian factories, Ukrainian cities deep behind the line of contact. The Ukrainians don't have that ability. The Russians can produce weapon systems without fear of being attacked by the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians can't do that. Now, what can the Ukrainians do? Well, obviously they're receiving equipment from the United States, from other NATO members and partner states, and that's being shipped through Polish territory to Ukraine. But the ability of the Ukrainians to mass produce artillery and weapon systems is being greatly negated by the ability of Russian forces, the Russian Air Force, Russian ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, to target those facilities. And again, the Ukrainians don't have that ability to target those Russian sites. So the Ukrainians are incredibly disadvantaged when it comes to the ability to create, produce, and field new weapon systems built or munitions built inside of Ukraine. Now, with that being said, that is being offset a bit by the inflow of weapons and equipment coming in from the West. So that's where we set for today. We'll continue to observe. We'll continue to report. We greatly appreciate everyone joining us today. More to come very, very soon. And as always, have a good day.